Hi, everybody. This is Charlie. This is the podcast To Hell and Back, and it's August 15th, 2025. It's a beautiful day here in Massachusetts, and I'd like to talk with you about this moment in our political situation in the United States um, from a psychological perspective. Uh, in particular, I'm going to want to get to what's, I think, being called increasingly out by the name of bystanders, the bystander phenomenon at the moment. So let me step back from that and introduce this by going back, first of all, to summarizing something from a previous podcast of mine a few weeks ago. And that was when uh, in looking at the drama that's taking place between the Trump administration and the United States, the battle between, from my point of view and many people's point of view, democracy with a small d and authoritarianism, uh, that I described it as a drama taking place with six categories of people. The first category, category number one, is Donald Trump himself, who seems to me to be largely driven by uh, desire for the image of being all powerful and great, uh, intelligent, omnipotent, etc., ambitious in that respect, and uh, driven a lot by not only the desire for power, dominance, uh, but also retribution. So that's Donald Trump first. Then there's the enablers, and the enablers are the inner circle. I'm not going to go through naming some of them, but we know there's kind of an inner circle of people that actually had this whole movement going before Donald Trump got elected and who have come together and who in many ways are driving the train even more than Donald Trump and probably looking to the future beyond Donald Trump. And therefore have just a lot of momentum and are a lot invested in this battle. Third category is the admirers of Trump and his administration. And those are the people in the United States that admire him, that look up to him, that think of him as some kind of savior, as some kind of person who is going to relieve them of the victimization that they have felt by the economy, by previous politics, by immigration, as he designates it, um, creating a sort of a scapegoat phenomenon. The admirers, the ones who are pretty much wedded to a Donald Trump positive point of view, in spite of the obvious corruption, lying, cheating, harshness, lack of empathy, uh, and all kinds of uh, unsavory behavior towards women, towards people of color, towards people from other countries, towards other allies in the world. Just goes on and on. You know the story. So those are the admirers. Then we get to a very, very large group that I'll just call generally because they're made up of lots of small subgroups called the neutrals. The neutrals. Now we've got Donald Trump. We've got the enablers, which are like the inner circle of drivers. Then we've got the admirers who are reinforcing the inner circle and Donald Trump. And then we've got the neutrals. And within the neutrals are all kinds of people who kind of aren't sure about what's going on, aren't sure about what they think, maybe agree with some things and disagree with others about the direction things are going, are kind of holding back, figuring out what's going on, and are ambivalent or ambiguous about what's going on. or don't understand what's going on, or don't pay much attention to the sort of headlines of the political battle that's going on here that's really like defining the future of the United States. And so there's the neutrals, which is, I think, a large category of people. And then there's the opposition, people who are more actively against what's going on, are fighting against what's going on, are advocating against, are showing up in the streets, are showing up in petitions, are showing up in lawsuits, are petitioning their representatives, people who are taking active positions opposed to what's going on, with the impression that what's going on is an authoritarian takeover of the United States, moving towards fascism. And then last, maybe is a group that is partially included in some of the other groups, but I'll just designate them separately as the victims of what's going on. The victims ultimately, sort of, at one end of this sort of spectrum is Donald Trump. At the other end are the victims of Donald Trump and his admirers and his enablers. And who are the victims? The victims are people of color. The victims are immigrants, people who are undocumented, um, sometimes women, especially when you have this sort of like Christian nationalism strain within this movement, that think that women really should step away from positions of authority, power, or decision making. Um, Victims are people who are poor, whose lives will be made worse by what happened with the big, beautiful bill that was passed and other decisions that are made, supposedly on their behalf, but actually, by all documentation of all economists, are likely to suffer, who need extra support, and that support's being taken away step by step, just as this sort of like so-called deep state is being dismantled, and all kinds of services are going away, and all kinds of supports are going away. So there are victims that way. Victims are people who are going to need health care and who are losing their health insurance or losing health care, or it's just getting harder to get. And hospitals are closed down. So people who need health care um, um, also are victims. So those are the main, there's other categories of victims too. And then, of course, there's specific people that are prominent and that are targeted for retribution by Trump and his enablers. So that's up to me, that captures the drama. If I was writing a play, if I was writing a drama, it would be a drama among these people and what's going on. And I think that, when I think of that drama and where is change possible, where could you try to move against an authoritarian strain? It wouldn't be trying to change Trump's mind. He's a done deal. The enablers, I think they're a done deal too. They're pretty much solid there. They've cast their lot, they've cast their life, they've cast their soul into this fight for authoritarianism, though they don't call it that. Um, there's billionaires, by the way, in all of these categories, though heavily centered in among the enablers and the admirers, and with some surprises where some people who used to be less this way have donated millions of dollars to Trump and have supported, have made deals with him, have capitulated to him, etc. So there's billionaires there. There's a few billionaires here. There's in opposition. There's probably a lot of billionaires among the neutrals, and billionaires, unfortunately, are a big player in our country, whatever decisions are made, because they seem to be the level of inequality between billionaires and other people has grown and grown and grown, and billionaires are capable, because of decisions in our country that have been made, to really exercise way more authority than people who aren't billionaires. Um, unless people act collectively, which I'll get back to. So that's kind of the drama, and it's hard to imagine changing the enablers, and probably most of the admirers are a done deal. I'm not sure about that. I know some people that I would consider admirers, that are really, as soon as you get into dialogue with them, they're sold. They are already uh, talking the talk, of Donald Trump and his enablers, and making justifications for it and rationalizations for it, and arguing for it. And so they're probably not going to change too much, though it is interesting that there have been some signs that there's some cracking taking place at that level, that in that particular constituency. The neutrals, on the other hand, are a big group. If you put together the neutrals and the opposition and the victims, that's the majority of the country. And the question is, what are the neutrals going to do? In the next election, what are the neutrals going to do? Day by day, what are the neutrals going to do? Are they going to move in the direction of the opposition? They're going to move in the direction of the admirers? They're going to stand on the sidelines and kind of like just see what happens. In which case, as I'm going to argue shortly, they're positioning themselves as bystanders that inadvertently are reinforcing the political pathology of Donald Trump and his enablers. So they're a big group, and they're a very important group, every single person. So that's what I wanted to start with, was just to bring back to mind that whole way of organizing things. Now, today I want to now focus on really focus in on the phenomenon of bystanders. Um, and I want to tell you two stories that come from my work as a psychiatrist, and in running programs and in learning treatments, that shed some light for me. They're the window through which I look at the larger picture of bystanders, because these are two bystander stories. The first one is when I was directing an inpatient hospital program for people with borderline personality organization in a psychoanalytic model built by Dr. Otto Kernberg, and he was my mentor and supervisor when I was doing that work in the 1980s. We would have our weekly case conferences and consultations and educational sessions, etc. And one of them that stands out to me, we had an adolescent in our program that was acting up, was opposing lots of things, was defiant, was difficult, was high risk behaviors. And so we had a case conference to focus on that person and what should we do to improve the treatment. And we had an outside consultant come in who was a psychiatrist who at the time was kind of one of the really known specialists in borderline adolescent psychodynamic treatment. And his name was James Masterson. So we had Masterson in, we told him about the case, we had him do an interview with the patient and with all of us, and then we had a discussion. And what I want to highlight from what he said is that his point of view was that actually we were doing a really good job, that we had good instincts about how we were handling, that we were setting some pretty clear limits with this adolescent, as well as with our patients in general, that we had good strategies for helping people cope with those limits, live within those limits, learn within those limits, change their personalities within those limits. In other words, he thought it was pretty good. But his main comment that stood out to me was, he said, you have really good rules and limits and mechanisms here in place, but you're only exploiting them 90% of the way. You're like doing 90% of a good job. And he said, and the difference between 90% and 100% is huge. It's way more than 10%. That really by doing 90%, you're not really addressing in a clear, responsive way what's going on with this adolescent. So the adolescent's getting the picture sometimes, something like 10% of the time, gets the idea of, oh, it's okay what I'm doing. It's okay that I'm defying things. It's okay that I'm being mean to people. It's okay that I'm harming myself a little bit. And he was saying that these are great things that we're trying to do, but we really should try to ratchet up from 90% to 100% and be really clear and really consistent and really solid in how we react to this adolescent as well as other patients. I really took that to heart. I really thought that was wise. I mean, first of all, I was really glad he didn't come in and just slam us and tell us we were doing a terrible job, and that's why this kid is acting out as much as they are. No, instead he was saying we're actually doing a good job, but we need to do what we're doing at a higher percent. And so that was sort of one story I wanted to tell you, because what he was saying in a way from a bystander point of view was that we were mostly being the active opposition, uh, holding accountable somebody's behavior and working with it therapeutically. We are mostly doing that, but in part we were bystanders. In part we were watching things happen without responding as crisply, as firmly, as responsively as we needed to. And so, in that respect, we were intermittently reinforcing problematic behavior, which is a real problem because intermittent reinforcement is a very powerful mechanism for reinforcing behavior. Second story, my later mentor, Marcia Linehan. I was in supervision with her. This is a story I often tell when I do DBT trainings. So if you've been to a training of mine, you might have heard this same thing, but it fits in this context. Uh, I was presenting, she supervised me for some time, and I would send videotapes of my therapy sessions to her, and she would watch them, and then we would talk. She would give me supervision, feedback. And she would get on the phone with me, and in those days, after she had watched this, and then she would always start by saying, "So, do you want the good news or the bad news first?" And I said, "Give me the good news." And she would give me the good news, which was usually that I was pretty validating and that I was smart, that I came up with good interpretations, which was probably partly because I had spent years training in psychoanalysis and treating people in psychodynamic therapy, where interpretations are considered gold. And so, she gave me a lot of credit, said I was a good therapist. But then Oak said, "Okay, I'm ready for the bad news." And in this one session, which stood out to me, she says, "Charlie, what were you doing between minute number 7 and minute number 17 of that session?" I said, "You mean what? What was I?" She said, "When you were quiet, you didn't say one thing. You didn't speak. You were silent for 10 minutes." I said, "But Marcia, I was thinking." "What were you thinking about?" she said. So I was just thinking, about the patient, what the patient was saying, how I thought of that, how I was reacting to that, how to understand that, what I might say to make a difference, et cetera, et cetera. I was doing what I basically learned in psychoanalytic treatment to do. And she said, "Well, that's really great for you. But meanwhile, in those 10 minutes, that patient engaged in 7 behaviors that are problematic and they're paving the road to hell for them. So that's great for you, but you're standing on the sidelines of a crime, of 7 crimes were committed right in front of you, and you did nothing about them in the service of thinking." Um, I said, "Well, what are the behaviors you're talking about?" And all of them were cognitive behaviors. They were things like, "I'm an incompetent person," saying, I'll never have a life, "no one will ever love me," things like that, sort of like cognitive, problematic cognitions that pave the road to pessimism and pave the road to negative functioning. And so she said, "You cannot, in therapy, in DBT, you just cannot let problem behaviors go by in front of you. You can't do that. You have to at least like highlight it, at least name it, at least raise your eyebrows and say, huh, or at least say something like, well, that's an interesting thought. And there's all kinds of ways you can intervene that don't require a massive intervention, but just require at least noting this is a problematic thought. And that's a good step. And so that's a DBT point of view and a behavioral point of view is that in a session, what you reinforce and what you don't reinforce makes a huge difference over time. And so you don't want to reinforce problematic behaviors. So this was another bystander phenomenon in individual therapy, that I'm a bystander of my patient doing problematic things. And I'm not taking any action. I'm not making any intervention. I'm not even noting that there's a problem. And so I was being a bystander. And she's saying, by being a bystander, you actually are reinforcing the problem behavior. So that's really, I think, a background for me in my work to begin to understand the bystander phenomenon. And in these last few months, being part of protests, being part of meetings, I've been, for instance, I'm in a group called Crimson Courage, which is made up of thousands of graduates and alumni of Harvard University, where I went to college. And we get online and we have these lengthy, not lengthy, but really well organized meetings. And then moving in the direction of being on committees, I'm going to be on a committee now that has to do with reaching out between the Harvard related this political action organization and ones from other universities and other institutions in the country to try to make sure that we're all trying to act in concert as much as possible. So being in those meetings, standing at protests, interacting with people online, um, I guess I've just come to see that bystanding is a very tempting position to be a bystander. It's very hard not to be a bystander sometimes. So what does that mean? Because I think that the need to get off of the sidelines one way or another, whatever that means, and I'll say by the end of this podcast a couple things I think that means, but I think you have to understand bystander psychology. And I think bystander psychology, I just made a list of a few things that I think characteristic of people who are sort of, yeah, I wonder if this is a good idea, or I kind of don't approve of this, but actually I'm on the sidelines. I'm gonna sit. It's like someone saying, I'm gonna sit this one out. I'm gonna sit this one out. So here are some of the reasons I think people do that. One, what you might call the diffusion of responsibility when you have a large group of people is that you say, why should I do this? There's all these people. Some people are doing stuff. That's probably going to be enough. And some people are not doing it. Why should I put myself out, put out my time, put out my energy, take any risks myself, put out my money, anything like that, when other people aren't doing that? So I think there is a kind of like a sense of being part of a large crowd where you don't have to be the active one because somebody else is going to be. And that's a sort of another belief within the same category. It's sort of like someone else will do it. There's a lot of people involved, and a lot of people are very smart. A lot of people are very active. Somebody's going to do this, so it's not a problem if I just sort of hold out. Um, Another thing is the belief that I don't really have anything special to offer. I'm just another person. And there are people, obviously, whose lives have prepared them for this moment. And they're the ones stepping forward, and they are either politicians or they're historians or they are organizers or they are technology experts or people who can really make a difference in this sort of technological world right now and take a position, and I don't really have any of that. So I really don't have much to offer. And so there's a kind of an undervaluation of the possibility of what I have to offer. So that's another thing. Um, Another belief I think that supports bystanderism is the belief that the carnage that's going on, the damage that's being done, will fade. we're going through a surge like a tsunami of this administration. And, it's the early part of the administration, and they're going to burn out or they're going to stop doing this. It's going to fade. And so I can wait it out. And I think the problem with that, I think, is by this point in time, after what's it been, like 7 months or something into this administration nearly, um, there's no evidence that that's going to happen. In fact, people even who are in the enabler category sometimes say things publicly like, this is just the beginning. Wait till you see where we're going. It's like, whoa, so that's I think an important thing to realize is that if you're waiting for the wave to stop or to go down, there is just no evidence that that's happening. If anything, there's evidence that it is like going further, but when it comes to the immigration enforcement, the deportation raids, the attack on the environment, the attack on social support systems for people, the attack on our allies, et cetera, et cetera. You know the story. Another thing that I think supports bystanderism is when people get engaged, and I've done this in the past myself. I'm just less inclined now with where we're at now to look for the rationale in what the authoritarians are doing, what Trump and his people are doing. Say, well, it isn't that bad. And actually, I kind of agree that there's a problem at the border. Thank God they're doing something about the border. I'm kind of agree there's crime in our cities. Maybe they should step in and maybe things will actually be better. I kind of agree that they're going to help with the economy. So even though it's tough now and inflation's going up and jobs are going down and things are getting more costly and everything, like, maybe we need to go through this, tightening our belt for a while in order to get to the other side. There's a kind of like a lot of arguments out there that one can debate, and people get involved in these internal debates and debates with other people that actually are like debating if you have a bully on a playground beating the crap out of other people, sitting there and debating the wisdom of letting them continue to beat the crap out of people. It's like, okay, let's talk about this. This is probably going to have a good end and things like that, which is like really going down the rabbit hole of debate, the rabbit hole of rationalization, the rabbit hole of intellectualization, and during which the carnage continues. Um, and so that attempt to see the rationale when somebody is so obviously corrupt, so obviously cheating, obviously lying every day, and obviously being incredibly harsh and lacking empathy and destroying connections around the world that we have with our allies. It's like so obvious that this is bad news to those of us in my persuasion that no, you can't, there's nothing to argue about. It just has to stop. And that includes kind of an ambiguity that I think supports bystanderism, the ambiguity of whether this is actually an emergency at all, or whether this is just like other moments in history, and we'll ride through it the way we rode through this and we rode through that, and things came out okay on the other side as if they did. Then there's the sort of very obvious things like the fear of speaking up. So I remain a bystander because I don't want to stand out. Because if I stand out, I'm putting my own neck on the line, and I'll get called out by somebody, by something. People are going to disagree with me. People are going to attack me. Whether it's the government doing that, or whether it's somebody in my business that's going to do that, or somebody in my friendship group or my family. So I really better not stand out, because by getting off the sidelines means you're putting yourself in a certain stance, and that stance puts you at risk of being disagreed with and in conflict, and maybe even in some form or other attacked. And the fear of retaliation in some cases, I mean, people are just losing their jobs right and left because they don't agree with the president. We even they just haven't had that in my lifetime. Uh, in such an obvious way. So those are the things I just wanted to say, that bystanderism is is an understandable phenomenon. It's a huge problem because it's a huge percentage of the United States right now is people who might be able to move in the direction of the opposition if only they were so inclined to. So it means that those of us that are in the opposition really have to try to take stances that help people stop being bystanders, the same way we had to stop being bystanders in my inpatient program with our patients when problematic behaviors came up. And I had to stop being a bystander in my individual therapy sessions when problematic behaviors came up. And we're having national political problematic behaviors on a daily basis, which I guess another thing that could support bystanderism is that we're so flooded, as they say, that the zone has been flooded with decisions and actions that you can't even keep up. It's just stunning. It's just stunning how day after day you wake up and hear how many things, how many actions are being taken by the administration. Um, Now, I think at this moment there is some reason for some hope, some encouragement right now. And one doesn't know how much to emphasize that because I really don't want to go down the road of thinking that therefore we should just stay on the sidelines because actually some good things are happening. But some good things are happening. Um, Washington, as of yesterday, which is a few days after Donald Trump decided to have a sort of a military takeover of Washington, D.C.'s police department and take over the policing role in Washington, D.C., which has all kinds of negative consequences from my point of view. But you know, uh, the Washington, D.C. is now suing the federal government to say that there is not an emergency that justifies this, that it doesn't fit any statutes that we have that would actually justify it, because actually the crime rate in Washington, D.C. has plummeted in the last 2 years, and it's better than it's been in a long time. And all of a sudden, this happens. So I think I was just happy to see that whether this will succeed or not is another question. But standing up against the machine, standing up and doing that is a good idea. Secondly, and similarly in tone, the fact that after the redistricting was called for in Texas by Donald Trump, and then the Republican legislature in Texas and governor are moving towards a redistricting plan in order to get five more Republican seats in Congress to replace Democratic seats and make it more likely that they can win the election in 2026 of the House of Representatives. That whole movement, that completely unfair movement, that because this isn't the time we do redistricting, it would be another 5 years from now. They're doing it only to win the election next year, and so there's all kinds of negative points of view that I'm not only one of millions that holds about that. That actually, Gavin Newsom, as governor of California, has been rallying people in California to have an election now on November 4th in California to uh, support a plan that if Texas goes ahead with that kind of redistricting plan, that California will do its own redistricting in a similar way that'll bring, I don't know how many seats, but maybe at least five Democratic seats by redistricting in California. Or if they do it in other states that Republicans are considering doing it, that will activate California doing it. And I like the way that it was put by somebody who was making comment about this, is that it's not unusual when Republicans use such harsh tactics, brutal tactics, like bully types of tactics, that Democrats are don't really react with that kind of like opposition that's at the same level. So Democrats whine, complain, argue about it, point out that this isn't fair, this isn't right, and it's a matter of words. And people say, well, it's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. The Republicans bring the guns, the Democrats bring the knives, and who's going to win that fight? And so this was like put that what California is trying to do is like bringing a gun to a gunfight, or actually maybe bringing two guns uh, when the Republicans are bringing one gun to a gunfight. So it's really meeting fire with fire, even though Democrats in general don't like the idea of this kind of redistricting. It's kind of unfair. But if the other side is playing dirty and you play clean, and as a result, you lose the country, and which opens the door to really dangerous consequences in the entire world, since the United States plays such a unique role in the world. And if it goes into an authoritarian direction more and more, then all of the major powers of the world are going in authoritarian directions. And the dynamics between all these different powers are not going to be good at a certain point because they're all kind of based on kind of self-centered, narcissistic kinds of policies. So, what else is so Gavin Newsom doing that is like taking a stand. He's standing up to this. Um, Donald Trump is today meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska, which was a weird and thing to do that Trump thinks is great and is going to help him. He's overtly in trying to campaign to be a Nobel Peace Prize winner. So he wants to work on this war thing, and he's framing the meeting today as in this kind of way of saying, well, I'm not really going to negotiate anything with Vladimir Putin. I'm going to listen to him. And that'll be a first step in a several step process that will eventually include Ukraine. And then we'll find a way to have peace. And it's sort of so transparent that he's just trying to make a big move and do something in the direction of so-called peace, but actually only with Vladimir Putin. And he's inviting Vladimir Putin to American territory, which used to be Russian territory. Uh, and actually, Vladimir Putin is already a designated international war criminal. He's not supposed to go to other countries. He's supposed to be arrested, but Trump is really giving him this major gift. And what's nice is that international leaders are seeing it that way, are calling him out on that, saying what he's doing is actually counterproductive and weak. And the last thing Donald Trump likes to be called is weak. So it's kind of like, again, meeting fire with fire. Um, and I'll just say one more thing is that even though I know polls go up and down, and I don't trust the polls in the long run to be telling it. I mean, we've had many times we've believed in polls and they've been wrong. But it does seem that for many weeks in a row, all different polls are showing that Trump's popularity is going down. And I think that's the neutrals and some of the admirers uh, he's losing some support among people that he had at least nominal support from before. So all of that's good. The economy is struggling, and I think people and that was supposed to be his main calling card. So I just wanted to say those things, and then I want to just turn to one final thing to say in this context, to not be a bystander. I mean, we really need everybody to get off the sidelines. We need everybody that has any point of view like this at all. Anybody who's neutral but leaning to the opposition, that we need people to get off the sidelines. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean making some massive commitment for every person, either financially or throwing away your life or putting yourself in actual danger, harm's way. In fact, the more people who do it, the safer it is in a way. But we need people just each in their own way. Like my own way includes doing this podcast. My own way includes like joining with my university. My own way includes sort of keeping track of other things and then joining into some movements or protests or things that come up. It's not a huge commitment. I'm not throwing my life into this, at least at this point yet. I have that in my mind. But we're each in our own way. And sometimes that just means in our own mind. And sometimes it means in a particular conversation with somebody that we're just taking a position, that we're getting used to the idea of taking a position. Um, and it just brought to mind this kind of like something that was really developed by or taught by Thich Nhat Hanh when he wrote a book and taught about what he called peace is every step, is that every step of your life can be a moment when you claim peace within yourself. You can believe in peace. You can believe in being in just this moment, taking care of this moment, taking care of yourself, taking care of your feelings, taking care of the people who are close to you. The peace is every step. It isn't something you do once in a while or in a big way or at a protest or something like that. Peace is every step. And I was thinking resistance is every step. So resistance is how you are thinking, how you're digesting information, what you're choosing to read, who you're talking to, how you're doing it. It's like every step is, am I being a bystander? Am I inadvertently reinforcing things that I see going on that are problematic? Am I holding back my voice in a conversation because I don't want to get in trouble? I don't want to get in conflict. I don't want to be shouted down. And so therefore I hold back, which sort of step by step is reinforcing those who are really trying to take over the country with authoritarianism. So it's kind of like you want to just step by step be doing that. You kind of want to be um, showing up, standing up, joining up, speaking up, uh, in all these different situations. And just to do that, if everybody does that and does it collectively and individually, and is alert to the possibility of being isolated, of being shouted down, of being divided off from other people, of being attacked. I mean, if we really can stand up, not only each in our own way with every step of resistance, but also that we do it along with other people. That's what's going to make a difference. You know, Harvard is trying to make a decision about the degree to which they make any deal with the Trump administration, because in fact, they're facing threats that are actually significant threats to their organization, to their university. Um, and then separately, UCLA is facing huge threats. Columbia faced huge threats, Brown University, and then university after university, college after college, and it's going to include all kinds of colleges and other institutions like law firms and things. But it's sort of like the fact that each one is dealing with this on their own and figuring out should I make a deal or not is kind of a problem, even though it's understandable. So there's a dialectic here that, of course, self-preservation of each college, of each university, of each institution is important, and operating in concert with other people who are trying to oppose the takeover by authoritarianism is also very important. And in the long run might be more important, but who's to say? I mean, I can't judge what it would be like to be in the boardroom of any of these universities right now, or the Smithsonian Institution takeover, which is a disaster. The idea of rewriting the history of the United States in order to reflect Donald Trump's preferred version of the history. So there's just lots going on, and the idea is, I think we need to really inspire ourselves to just take a position, to step up, to speak up, to read things, to talk. Reading is really important right now. Read whatever is your preferred stuff. I'm not going to suggest anything because we're all exposed to different things like that. But there's a lot of really thoughtful commentating going on in podcasts, in Substacks, in people's writings right now. So It's just like be an informed person. And if you are a bystander, think about that. Think about whether that's really the position you want to be in or whether it's time to get off of the sidelines. So I'm going to just leave us with that and continue on my way about these things. And I hope that there was something in this that was useful to you. As usual, get back to me with any comments on my email, c.robert.swenson@gmail.com, or through my website, charlieswenson.com, or wherever you follow this podcast. Okay? Take good care. Have a good day. Bye.